Welcome to Western Sydney Community Forum's interactive live stream forum. And today's forum is titled COVID-19, Moving Your Organisation to the Next Phase. My name is Tom Nance and I am your host for today's session. And as I begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the many lands that we are meeting on today for our session. I personally find myself on Darug land and I pay my respect to elders on this land and beyond, both past, present and future. I also acknowledge with respect Aboriginal friends and colleagues who are joining us today. Thank you for joining us today with our interactive live stream forums that are a series that brings together community services and stakeholders in Western Sydney. It's an uncertain time, and as we find restrictions starting to ease, that uncertainty definitely isn't easing. I wanted to acknowledge that human services across Greater Western Sydney and beyond are supporting communities who are experiencing vulnerability and crisis at the moment and say, keep up the good work. Today's session is really about that conversation. Not only what some of the challenges are we've faced as a sector, and I'm about to hear from three leaders from our sector who are going to share their personal experiences, but also what some of the implications are for our services, for our strategic thinking and for our service delivery in terms of the easing restrictions as we see ourselves slowly but surely emerging from the shadow of this pandemic. So just quickly before I introduce our speakers, a little bit of housekeeping. So this is an interactive panel. There's the opportunity to contribute to the conversation for our audience as well as our panelists. You can contribute at any time through two different ways. Firstly, you can raise your hand. You click the raise hand button on your device and you'll join a queue. We then will invite you to share your question through our voice facility. If you prefer, you can click on the Q&A button on your device and type your comment or question in, which I will read out on your behalf. I'd like to welcome all our guests who are tuning in via our YouTube stream. Now, you don't have those options. However, what you can do is you can post comments and questions on the stream live on YouTube, and they will be shared in the forum. So I think it's time to meet our panelists, and I will introduce them one at a time. Our first panelist who is joining us today is Melissa Monteiro. Melissa is the CEO of Community MRC. Welcome, Melissa. Our second panelist is Tairyn Vergara, and she's the CEO of the Parks Community Network, who are based in the Fairfield local government area. And finally, I want to introduce Stephanie Oatley. Stephanie Oatley is the CEO of Platform Youth Services, who operate in the Nepean Blue Mountains area. Also a Zest Hall of Famer. Welcome, Stephanie. So I'm going to kick us off with our first question. I might start with you, Tairyn. As the CEO of your organisation, what was the biggest challenge that has emerged so far for you during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, hi, Tom. So initially, the biggest challenge was managing the uncertainty. So not knowing what was going to happen, working out how we could be proactive in dealing with the pandemic within the organisation and for our community as well. So managing the uncertainty that each of my team members felt, each volunteer, each client and our community members and more broadly, colleagues from other organisations and funding bodies. So the pandemic caused distress and anxiety throughout our community. So there was the initial shock that we needed to manage in an effective way. We needed to proactively respond to the threats, and not just the threats, but also the perceived threats that were so many. As a place-based community organisation, we knew that our role, we knew what our role was, and we had to respond initially. And the way that we responded initially was to shift a lot of our resources to more of the welfare work that our organisation does. So we had to move a lot of our community development efforts to the welfare side of things. So and then we could incorporate the community development approach and a place-based approach, which we managed to do. But I think initially was to manage all the emotions and rightly so, I guess, the fear and anxiety, shock. Yeah, so I guess that was the biggest challenge. So moving our operations to different service of delivery, like ways of delivering programs in a community where using the internet access is not so widely possible. So it was quite difficult to provide options, and that's what we wanted to do, to provide options. So yeah.
Thank you, Tairyn. And I think I'll go to you, you next, Stephanie. For you as a CEO of a service that provides not only support for young people, but also accommodation, what was the biggest challenge that emerged for you?
So thanks, Tom. So Platform is a youth housing support service, and at the time, back in March, we actually had 277 clients. So that's 277 young people, as young as 12, who are actually experiencing homelessness. So for us, the biggest challenge was a balancing act, balancing the needs of the clients and the clients' expectations, and then our responsibilities that we have to the clients. We had to balance that with the needs of our staff and the staff's expectations and our responsibilities to staff. So we do have 24-hour services, and we do have services that require supervision of young people under the age of 18. These young people are required by law to have supervision. So it was ensuring that we had a staff cohort to actually be available. And then along with that, of course, was the not knowing what to expect. We didn't know how long this was going to last. We didn't know what the impact of COVID-19 was going to be. And we didn't know how we were to respond and how the government and how those lockdowns. So I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but Platform was actually early to the party. So we had an incident in Katoomba High School 2 weeks before lockdown. So we already had a policy in place when the government brought lockdown in. So I'm not sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but we already had an experience of COVID-19 at the beginning of March. So we were a little bit ahead of the game at that point. But the young people we work with, they are the most vulnerable. We work with young people in assertive outreach, so young people street sleeping and couch surfing. We have 3 crisis refuges, and we have approximately 30 transitional properties. So these young people live on their own. And we have caseworkers that actually do home visits and daily support. So all that changed basically overnight. And how we were to respond to those young people basically changed overnight. How are we going to provide support in a lockdown world, and how do we encourage and educate our young people to what lockdown actually looks like? So that was a bit of a balance. And then so the staff. So we have 50 staff. They're all essential workers, but 12 of them we actually class as critical workers because they had to run the 24/7 youth refuges. And it was about trying to work with the staff. The staff are managing their own reactions to the pandemic. And for a lot of our staff and a lot of you out there, homeschooling became a nightmare. So lots of our staff have young children, obviously as young as kindergarten right up to high school, that suddenly became homeschooling. So that was a major concern for our staff. We also had a lot of staff that had family who were out of work. And we had staff that had responsibilities to care for others, whether that be elderly parents or family members. So managing staff and staff's response to the pandemic was crucial. And we had to ensure, it was imperative at the end of the day that we had staff available to continue supporting young people. So yeah, sorry, Tom, I do ramble, but it's about the balance.
Yeah, and that comes through from your answer, that balancing act that you have, not only in terms of balancing the needs of your staff and your client group, but also balancing the old ways that you were working, and that real quick pivot that you had to do in terms of providing support in an entirely different way. I'm going to go to you now, Melissa. And Melissa, as a organization who has a presence in a lot of different, very distinct communities in Western Sydney, what was the biggest challenge that emerged for you and your organization during the pandemic?
Thank you, Tom. I agree with Stephanie and with Tairyn and all the points that you have raised. For us, it was pretty much the same. The challenges, I'd say, Tom, were really adapting to the new environment, whether it was with the staff or whether it was with our clients and our communities, adapting to the new environment and communicating the message. Internally, we are also a medium-sized not-for-profit, and we have a very large footprint in Western Sydney and Northern Sydney regions, providing settlement services to newly arrived migrants and refugees. And annually, we have about 30,000 clients. And so for me, the biggest challenge as the CEO was communicating the message first internally, working with the core group of senior staff, communicating the message that we would, or the decision that we would remain open. And so right from day one, during the pandemic, we were open, Tom. We were able to do this, and I think we did it successfully only because, first of all, the message was communicated very clearly across the whole organization through all our 7 or 9 teams. Then again, we used various platforms after that. Staff were given the opportunity and the option to work from home. We followed very strict social distancing. We have an office manager that managed that really beautifully. And can I just say, all credit to the core group, because this was something that we did together as an organization. The decision both ways, back and forth. And during this time, I think the biggest challenge was for me to communicate the message clearly across all the different tiers within the organization and outside. A lot of support from the board. New lines of communication, new ways of communicating was the biggest challenge, I'd say. And like you, Stephanie, and like you, Tairyn, fear and anxiety was always, prime at the top of our heads all the time, especially if you have staff that have pre-existing conditions and it was like, why do we need to come to work? Or at other times we found that staff said, why don't we just close shop just like all the other organizations? And a number of organizations I know, and my belief right from day one was, let's do what we can, do it well and do it best. And it suited us because we have an organization, an office setup that you don't really, we have multiple individual rooms and interview rooms. And so we were like 1 staff or maximum maybe 2 staff in a large office area. So we didn't really come in touch with each other all the time. And it was good, yes.
Thanks, Melissa. And definitely, but what you're emphasizing is that human element. So no doubt all 3 of you as not-for-profit leaders had to balance not only the strategic versus operational considerations of the org. So strategically, how do we deliver services that have impact and support our communities? But operationally, how do we make sure people are 1.5 meters apart? But also, how do we do that in a way that's supporting our communities and also supporting our workforce, who was so important during this time? So I think I'm going to go to you, Stephanie. So obviously you manage an organisation that provides accommodation, and a lot at that, 277 young people in accommodations, no mean feat. But in terms of that, obviously it would present its own challenges. So how have you been able to balance that? The, on one hand, increased risk that COVID-19 presents, but on the other hand, delivering quality support to the young people you're working with?
It was difficult at the beginning because, similar to Melissa, we do have many different programs, and each program we had to look at as an individual program and what procedures were put in place. And it was also very difficult because our core work has always been face-to-face crisis work. We're working with vulnerable young people. We do home visits. We take young people to housing, to health appointments, Centrelink, real estate, shopping, education, school. So everything's done in support. We walk with our clients. So that had to change automatically. And it was done really, really well at the, great credit to the staff of Platform. But what we did, immediately we implemented policy. So we implemented a policy process that was updated every weekend, ready for Monday morning. We were very concerned that staff were being overloaded with information. So we took that, myself and compliance manager took that on board to actually spend time going through all the information from government, from health, put together a policy update and just send one email per week to staff that had it all included, so they weren't so overloaded. We always kept in front of the 8 ball. And for me and my position, that meant a lot of watching and reading the news, reading the health alerts, trawling through an overload of information. But I did that to protect the staff and to keep the staff focused, because you could easily get lost in the pandemic itself. So our policies included a procedures for managing young people exposed to COVID or young people who were tested positive to COVID. So being an accommodation service, that meant that we had to ensure that we had separate bedrooms, bathrooms, outdoor facilities, meals and medical support. So we could actually self-quarantine within our service. In April, we were actually fortunate enough to have one of our properties was actually vacated. So we're able to have a COVID house that was actually used as a self-isolation house. We were also, I don't know if it was lucky or not, but because we had an early scare, we were able to secure our PPE, our personal protective equipment, quite early. And we allocated that to our 24-hour services. So they were able to have continuous service. And we implemented intense cleaning and hygiene practices. So for example, in one of our youth accommodation services, if a young person went out, on return to the property, they had to shower and wash their clothes in order to reduce the risks to the other young people in the house and obviously to the staff. So staff and clients, they disinfectant through the day, they provided hand sanitizer and hand washing reminders. But one of the issues that came up very early in the piece for us is that we now have 6 teenagers at home board. So normally before COVID, these young people were engaged in day programs, they were at work, and now they were at home. So we had to implement new house programs, which included, board games, craft activities, sporting equipment. And we had to implement a whole policy and procedures about and scheduling things for the day. And making sure that there was stuff to do. We also got IT packages, Netflix for all our clients, regardless, so those in transition as well as those in accommodation, just to assist with the boredom. We're talking like, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that didn't actually understand COVID, let alone being told that they're now got to stay at home. So we worked through that. We have a sort of outreach team who are very field-based. So we had to do a policy for them that actually allowed for unavoidable contact policy. So there were times where we had to go out in the field, but that was done reliant on PPE and risk assessments, and only emergencies. So we really were very, a bit selective in what class is an emergency and what could be done over the phone. We really implemented some great new procedures that relied on Zoom and phone. We were doing home visits using Zoom, and having young people walk around the house with their phones. To ensure the clients in transition were supported, we actually purchased computers, phones, and Wi-Fi packages to ensure that young people had access. One of the big things that we hear a lot is a lot of young people are on prepaid. They don't have credit. So we ensured that they not only had credit, but they also had Wi-Fi so they could watch Netflix and access other things to keep them occupied. We use social media a lot, and we actually created some new social media platforms that we're able to engage with young people on. And we also, in that initial period, and we still today, we sent out no contact care packages. So we made sure that our young people had food and personal items, including toilet paper. We bought 5,000 rolls of toilet paper and we distributed that, because once again, remember, we were early to the party. And we distribute that out to all. And I say 5,000, I don't mean 5,000, more like 500, but just, I should watch what I say. People say, oh, she's the one that started the toilet crisis. No, it wasn't us.
I was thinking it, Steph.
No, it wasn't us. We were very, and we shared all our resources with other services too. But the biggest risk, like I've already mentioned, was our 24/7 youth refuges and making sure that we had staff available. So we had done surveys with staff because, some staff expressed that they couldn't come to work if it was unsafe to do so. And we really believe that's their right. They have their own children, their own families, their own needs to meet. So we allowed that. Like, we didn't expect any staff member to come to work, but we were just lucky that across our entire staff force that we were able to have a list of staff that were available. As it turned out, we didn't need to use that, and our staff continued throughout the whole time. But once again, it's like we said before, no one knew what to expect. And like, you're watching the news, is this pandemic, the world's closing down. At that initial bit, like, staff didn't really know, like, could this affect us? Now when we look back, it's like, it's different when you look back retrospectively, but at the time. And then, of course, the big thing for us was the 40 staff that work in outreach. So for the 40 staff, our walk-in centres, and was suddenly working from home and working remotely. We had a rotation. So we had a team in the office and 3 teams at home. So 1 week in the office, 3 weeks at home. The team that was in the office, they looked after the intake, the phones, the emergency food packages, and the non-avoidable contact requests. And then the staff at home were doing the intakes, the phone visits, the Zoom meetings, and follow up. That has worked really, really well. And it's actually something we're looking at doing in the future as well, as having this rotation. We've actually, so in the month of June, we've rotated now, instead of 1 in 4, it's 1 in 2. So we've doubled the teams. We are aiming to be back to full capacity in August. And we're just going to use June, July as our transition months. So internally, we have weekly wellness check-ins. We increased individual supervision. So staff were having individual time with their supervisors. We also did team building activities. So for the team that was in the office, that might include treasure hunts, morning teas. For those at home, we were doing Zoom morning teas, online quizzes, wellbeing tips. So we were just doing what we could to increase staff morale and keep staff motivated. And actually, we had a return to work party this week. So social distancing maintained. But we actually, in our big office, were able to have a back to work party with limited numbers, but just to boost that staff morale. And it was so nice to see everybody. But we are all back on track for the 1st of August. So things are looking really good. As far as staff go, we did offer external support internally. So extra supervision. We also offered external support. So staff that, you know, would rather talk to a confidential person, or if they were actually concerned about COVID themselves, we actually gave them the opportunity to talk outside. And we offered flexibility of hours to all staff. So we were able to offer staff hours between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. to take into account the dreaded homeschooling. And that allowing that, you know, staff, you might work for us for an hour and then homeschool for an hour, us for an hour, homeschool for an hour. And we allowed staff to reduce their hours for the month if that's, but all in all, it actually went really well. Our staff are absolute champions. We've had no issues. All staff have stayed on the books. All staff have worked and have appreciated the flexibility of working in the office or working remotely. And as far as I know today, all our clients are also satisfied with the service that they've received, although they're hanging out to see their caseworkers again in person.
And I think, Steph, thanks for sharing that, because there's a lot of tangible things to take away from that, whether you're a housing provider or not. There's a lot of tangible things. But for me, what really comes through is, I guess, managing your team, and not only managing your team, but leading them through this pandemic, not only in terms of, I guess, what you can offer them through, you know, wellbeing check-ins, through return to work parties, and congratulations on that, but also through that decision very early on to filter that information. We know that a lot of not-for-profits have told us that one of the biggest challenges has been just making sure their staff aren't getting too anxious about what's going on, and making sure that they're able to concentrate on supporting the community rather than the endless ticker that was COVID's news blogs. So thanks for that, Steph. And I think I'm going to cross now to you, Melissa. And you mentioned earlier that communication and communicating the message both internally and externally was a key thing for you during this pandemic so far. I just wanted to ask, you know, there's a clear move by your organization towards social media, towards online delivery. I looked at your Facebook page, and you're delivering a lot more through online platforms to support your communities. What have been some of the challenges with that? But also, how have you supported your team to change and to move to this model?
Okay, thank you, Tom. For me, I think the biggest and the most important thing that we did very successfully was, as I said, communicating the message, adapting very quickly to the new environment. Every week, I would have a communique that was sent out to all staff. And at times when it was relevant, I would send it to the board as well. It was important that everyone knew what was happening, because when COVID presented, no one knew what the next day would look like. And there was, like I said, fear and anxiety. And it was important that the whole organization is on the same page. And I think the communique that was sent out weekly, in touch with every staff member via email, was very important. The core group, as I said, which a few senior staff played a very important role in the core group that helped with the communication, this balance of, who is doing what, how, because we had to adapt very quickly, like you all. We had to make changes in the structure, the seating, and the rooms, and so admin, played a very huge role during that time. Planning together was something that we did, Tom. It was not a top-down approach. And I worked with the managers, worked with the teams in saying, how best can we respond to this? And one of the strategies that we adopted was then this whole online move and shift to make everything online. We were present in the organization, but we did everything virtual. We ran craft groups, mothers groups, play groups, supporter play groups, activities online. Our young people, we've got a huge, a very, very large a refugee youth transition support program. And we did, fantastic, creative, innovative things, as you would see on our Facebook page, because we became alive and we were out there nearly 3 to 5 times a day engaging. Tom, we actually reached out to our community in our engagement. I'd say, spiked and just actually spiraled to, like, say, 7,000, 9,000, 11,000, which we were not doing previously. Would be 3,000 or maybe 4,000 engagement. At sometimes it went to 12,000. So that is the power of the internet, which we harnessed at the time. At all times, we managed to say that caring for ourselves was very important. In this whole shift, we had to really stick to the caring for ourselves motto. We had to embrace it. We had to actually keep it at the top of all the work and the activities we did. Creatively thinking, innovatively managing programs, because, as you know, you can't just keep talking and having things virtual. Webinars is something that we did instantly, like you all, Stephanie, Tairyn. We did that because we run a business support program as well, the only multicultural business support program in the state. And that was done because we had to support our businesses and the local multicultural businesses that had lost all hope, that was so kind of frustrated because of the closure, and they wanted to be open but they couldn't. So we were actually, at sometimes we had to provide emotional support, but that is something that we did with the webinars, reaching out to 5,000 businesses and 5,000 engagement and 7,000 more recently, partnering with other online agencies that helped us to broaden our reach, because as an organization we had a smaller reach. But because we partnered and collaborated, which is one of the great things that this organization does, and we do it really well and strongly, our reach online, if you can see, is heightened at the peak, the peak of the COVID, which was the 6 week, between the 4 to 6 week mark, if you remember. That is when things were really, the fear, the anxiety. But as an MRC, we did really well. So embracing the virtual world was our strategy. And that's why, Tom, you see what you see on our Facebook page, and us diversifying into every platform that was available online. Finally, can I just say that this is the new reality, and the staff have really adopted it. We have adapted and we have adopted, but it is the new reality. And for me, I just must make mention to the time when we see seniors and the older people, and getting into Zooms, and this you watch it. It's so beautiful to see them saying, "Show me how to do it," and that is something we did online courses also on our Facebook page for the seniors. So that's another target group that we have worked with very creatively. Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa. And definitely it's one of those things where we both look at, I guess, the sector's ability to adapt, but also the community's ability to adapt to this new normal. We've got a couple of questions that have come in, and just a gentle reminder to everyone, please feel free to hit the Q&A button and submit your questions. But I'm going to go to you first, Tairyn. So the Parks Community Network remained open throughout COVID-19. And I just wanted to, I guess, understand what the key factors were in terms of making this decision, and what changes you had to make as a leader to support this, and also as an organisation to support remaining open.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I guess we're an essential service. So from that, we started from that premise, and we also felt that we needed to continue to have a physical presence. So we were very clear from the beginning that what our purpose is, and that we needed to respond to this using a place-based approach. We also wanted to reach the most vulnerable community members. So it wasn't just about maintaining or supporting community members or clients who are already connected to our service, but it was also about reaching emerging vulnerable community members. So that was partly the decision that we made to remain our front door open. So we wanted to reach victims of domestic violence who couldn't make the call from home or couldn't ring to make an appointment, but needed to just walk through our front door, or residents with mental health issues who were not coping or not understanding what was happening, who just needed to drop in, or frail-aged seniors who didn't have access to the technology. So we actually felt that it would be more effective to do it that way. So there were some of the reasons. So we wanted to, I guess, reach as many people as possible. And because we work also across such a large number of target groups as well, we work with children, families, seniors. But some of the changes, we had to do lots and lots of risk assessments, risk mitigation on a daily basis, communication, just like Melissa mentioned and Stephanie, was very, very important. So we implemented communication strategies, design new policies and procedures. We moved a lot of the work that we were doing previously online. We did have to minimize face-to-face contact. So we would do what was essential face-to-face, and everything else through online platforms, over the phone, and so forth. We kept on doing welfare checks as well. So in the child protection space, welfare checks using WhatsApp and FaceTime is not always effective. So we actually had to put all the processes in place and safe procedures in place so that we could do the welfare checks. So we made that decision as well to continue to do home visiting for that component. So there were some of the changes. So risk mitigation, but we also started to analyze opportunities. And I guess that was a big turning point for us as well, because we didn't sort of just get bogged down in the fear and the uncertainty. We started to explore possibilities and collaborations as well. So we did partner with other organisations to deliver food parcels, activity packs. Not everybody was going to, we understood that not every community member was going to access through Facebook Live an activity, that we needed to deliver activity packs for school holidays whilst children were at home. For seniors, we did teach a number of seniors how to use WhatsApp and Facebook, and we were already doing that prior to COVID. So I guess it was really rewarding to see how some seniors already knew it, but then others couldn't reach us through those methods. So we needed to deliver to do contactless deliveries, of course. So there was that. Also, we needed to tap into our employee assistance program. So that, as part of our communication strategy, support to our employees to give people options. I guess that was always at the top of our agenda, to do things safely, but always to provide options, and as many options and engagement points as possible for the community, for my team, for our volunteers. So there were some of the changes. And I guess I must also say that we're very fortunate, because I always felt, and the board always felt, that we had the resources to maintain our front door open. We had supportive council who allowed us to remain in all our buildings to do the welfare work that we do. Obviously the groups couldn't operate, but they gave us that support. But it wasn't a constant. We always knew, okay, we'll keep our front door open, but if things change, we had a lot of contingency. If we couldn't access the building, we could continue to operate. And yeah, they're the sort of things that we looked at. So it wasn't, okay, we will remain open right throughout the pandemic. We will open as long as it feels it's the right thing to do for our organisation.
Thank you, Tairyn. And definitely that opportunity mindset is something that we're, I guess, hearing more and more about as we start to emerge from this pandemic. What's the opportunity for us to do things in a different way to help the community as we turn this curve? We've got a couple of questions, and very similar questions too. Atem and Saritha are both on the same page on this one. And it's a question for you, Melissa. So the question's around communicating to recently arrived communities. And obviously there are barriers there, particularly around those who have challenges to accessing technology. How have you done that effectively, and have you seen it improve over time?
Yes, we have. In fact, there are three things that we noticed at the very start of COVID. One was that a lot of the communities we work with have faced increased isolation. Two is that technology was very new to many people, yet not to the young people that we work with, because the young ones are very, very techno savvy. So we didn't find that as a problem or an issue with the young people at him. And the third thing that I saw at the very start, and the feedback that we were getting through our staff and community workers, was the resilience. A lot of the communities that we work with, especially humanitarian and refugee communities, who've already come through a fair bit of trauma, who've already had very upsetting, difficult situations in their lives. And so they've been they not, I wouldn't say in a way embraced it, but it was more accepting. And it was, yes, we'll deal with it, in a way that we could best provide support with and to them. But it was something that we noticed as staff here at the organization when we would have our staff meetings. This was the report that was actually coming back. A lot of people lost their jobs, and that, I feel, because of the industry. And if many people were either, say, in packaging or construction or industries or factories that closed down, and so a lot of people lost their jobs. So I think managing the financial burden was prime, more than the actual technology. Technology, I think, was a way that the young people are able to communicate with the older people in their families and say, this is how you do it, and this is how you do Zoom, etc. I'm not saying that it wasn't. It was an issue. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melissa. And thank you to our audience for asking those questions. I'm going to use that to segue into a question for you, Tairyn. So as Melissa alluded to, a lot of people have lost their jobs through this, and Parks Community Network is a provider of emergency relief. What do you think the implications are for organisations like yours that provide that relief? And what strategies might you or other organisations similarly put in place to cope with the increasing demand caused by the pandemic?
Yeah, we're actually very concerned what's going to happen in the next few months. We provide emergency relief, but we are not funded anymore to actually provide the service through DSS. So we actually do food relief and emergency relief within our own resources. And we have shifted more and more of our resources to food relief through this pandemic. And I think we will need to continue to do that for many more months to come. And we're prepared to do that. But I guess at the same time, I think we need to advocate and we need to collaborate so that the funded bodies are aware that this is there will be high levels of disadvantage, and this might be part of the new normal. So we need to respond at all levels to these greater levels of disadvantage. I remember on the day that cafes had to shut down, like where we're based, we're part of a shopping centre, the number of people that just walked here and actually said, can you please help us? Can you help me? People that would not have given us a second thought as an organisation if this had not happened. So, and I guess that was very humbling for me to experience, and also to understand, okay, yes, we do need to keep our door open, because otherwise we're not going to be able to talk to these people. I remember ringing one of the local clubs because we actually had some club funding to do an event later on in the year, and I was actually ringing them to say, look, we need to do food relief. Can we use these funds to do food hampers and deliver them to vulnerable community members? And basically they said, yes, please go ahead. It's a very sad day. I'm actually preparing the letter for 400 staff members who are going to lose their job today. That was the day that they actually had to close all the clubs as well. So yes, I'm very particularly concerned, but I think we need to also continue to do the community development work. So now as we move to the next stage, I think that again is going to play a really big part of recovery. So to do the capacity building, to continue to build the resilience of our community, we're particularly happy that we now can continue that work, because I think that's really important to help people to learn new skills and make really informed choices. I think that's also going to be crucial. So I think we need to do a number of things in parallel. And also to continue to build the evidence of what we do and that it works, and community development is important. It's not welfare per se, but it is very important. And also for in times of pandemics and natural disasters, it's so important. So yeah, so I think collaboration is also going to be very important at all levels.
Definitely. Thanks for the answer, Tairyn. It's definitely something that, you know, it looks like there is going to be increasing demand, and definitely we're watching as a peak what that looks like within Western Sydney, where there are pockets of extreme disadvantage that have been exacerbated by this pandemic. So I'm going to put a question to you, Stephanie, from one of our audience members, and they've asked, what adaptations do you think should remain moving forward in terms of how we've been doing things, and what is likely to be dropped once we start to move away from the pandemic and the restrictions that we're under?
I think there's opportunity here, and I think as a service, it would be, the opportunities. We need to really look at the opportunities. What I think will stay is some of the new platforms that we're using with our young people. So young people are all over social media. We haven't had any experience having that young people not wanting to engage with us. But what we found is at the beginning of the pandemic, they were very, very eager. And towards the end, they're like, oh, not you again. And they want to go back to phone calls. We don't want to FaceTime. But platform now has a TikTok account, which has started to engage young people back, and we've been sending out activities and, you know, having challenges on TikTok. I think some of the things that will really move forward is some of the ways that we run our partnerships. Like these online Zoom training and online Zoom meetings has really, really worked for us. We've been able to do an increase on staff training because it's been cheaper and it's more easily accessible for our staff, because we cover like Penrith up to Katoomba out in the Hawkesbury, and accessing training, the travel time has always been a bit of a block. So that's something that I think will definitely stay, that we're able to resource a broader geographic using a lot of this technology. I think we'll definitely keep that. And I think when we're talking about some of the challenges, so some of the challenges that we're seeing now in the last couple of weeks is a massive increase in demand. So while things went quiet for housing, you know, lots of young people, lots of, you know, homeless people were put in temporary accommodation. All that's starting to come to an end now. So it's about ramping up business, and we're going to try and use some of these, you know, technologies to actually try and engage differently with real estate. Platform also has an app And it was previously, it was a training app that we used to run training and living skills with our clients. We've actually branched that out now. So we run it like the Rent It, Keep It program. We run on as an online component, where before it used to be a group component. And we're actually going to offer that to real estates as well. So we're going to start looking at what other resources we have that we can actually offer. And I think some of the risk assessments are going to stay. Some of the new questioning that we've been questioning with young people will actually stay, because it's opened up a door for conversation that we didn't previously have. Yeah, so I think there's opportunities here, and I think the online and, you know, for a service that's geographically spread out, online stuff has been a godsend. We have saved so much time in travel. That will definitely be something that we will think about. And also, just quickly, one of the things that's important for staff is that previously staff weren't working from home. We're actually going to keep a work from home component, because it allows staff to catch up on admin and to be away from the buzz of the office. Like our main office gets very, very busy, and allowing, you know, a day a fortnight, a day a month, whatever at home, we're actually going to keep that as well.
Fantastic. And I'm aware of time, so we're going to move to our last question now, which is for all three of our panelists, but it's actually a two-parter now, because we've got a fantastic question that has just come in. So over the past few weeks, of course, there's been a flurry of announcements. We can now go to the footy again. Our pubs and clubs are opening up. Things are slowly starting to return to what we once knew as normal. Now, as we move through phase 2 and phase 3 of COVID restrictions, I'm going to start with you, Melissa. What do you think needs to be on every organisation's agenda as we plan our service delivery around the easing of restrictions? And what do you believe as a sector we need to collectively advocate for? Melissa, you're just on mute.
Sorry about that. Tom, the second question, collectively advocate, what we've seen as a migrant resource center and what has been brought to our attention is the vulnerabilities of certain sections of the community, especially those that are here on temporary visas. For example, the international students who have all lost their jobs and who are, you know, in a very difficult way, and they were not able to access the job keepers will. So for those target groups, I think some kind of collective action could be kind of done, and advocacy at that other level. For all organizations, I think going forward is to embrace this now as the new norm, and to be prepared, to have a plan and to have a strategy. And like I said, it's very important to have buy-in of all levels, because it's important to get your board. The board has to understand, your staff, your senior management, and the teams have to understand. And at the end of the day, communicating this message to the communities and working together, because what COVID has really presented is you're not in it alone. And people have to know, and those target groups and those target communities have to understand that we are in it together. And no one is singled out, because COVID really, as we've seen, it basically can, you know, it can be anyone. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are. It can attack you. And so my final message is to press the restart button, as for anything new that presents at any point in time. Yes, the challenges have been there. Embrace them. Be positive about it. Have a positive mindset. Work strategically. And, you know, if we have strategic plans and a COVID strategy and a COVID plan like you did, I think, Stephanie, you mentioned that you had a COVID policy. Very important with your policy to have a strategic plan that clearly outlines and articulates the next steps for your organization.
Definitely. Thank you, Melissa. Tairyn, I'm going to go to you. What do you think we need to collectively advocate for as a sector, and what needs to be on every organisation's agenda when we're planning service delivery around the easing of restrictions?
Great. I think it's more than ever before the time to collaborate and support each other as a sector. I think that a place-based approach to recovery is crucial. And I think that, and if I have to say around advocacy, I would say place-based strategies in times of pandemic, natural disasters, and every other time. I think place-based approach and strategies. So I think it's really important that we understand where the community is at in terms of recovery, and I think we need the time to evaluate what we have done, because a lot of the evaluation that I hear from the sector is basically coming from the sector, but we haven't actually given the community the opportunity to say, you know what, yes, that did work, or look, I was really suppressing my needs because you were saying to me to just talk to you about essential matters. So I think we need that in order to fully say, okay, we're going to keep this and we're going to drop this and we're going to implement this or that and the other. I think that is probably the missing part, because we are still in the middle of it. Like we're not over, it's not over yet. So I guess in terms of recovery, safety, wellbeing and collaboration, safety at all levels, wellbeing for everyone, the team, volunteers, the community, and collaborations at all levels.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tairyn. And
you.
Stephanie, you've got the final word. What do we need to be collectively advocating for as a sector, and what needs to be on every organisation's agenda when they're planning around the easing of restrictions?
I do agree with my fellow colleagues here. It's that it is a time where we need to work in collaboration. It is a time where we actually need to start to fill some of the gaps. And I do think there's so much opportunity in the rebuild. So, you know, we're maybe halfway through this, maybe a quarter of the way through this. And it's like trying to move forward and to find that opportunity and take advantage of government schemes. But I think I just have to put my youth hat on here, my youth advocate hat. Sorry, everybody else. But the youth allowance needs to be increased. It's only been increased temporarily for this period. What happens at in September, the cost of living doesn't change. So I think youth allowance needs to be looked at. And I'm going to put my homeless hat on here and say there needs to be access to more housing. So there's homeless people have been given TA through this time to keep them safe. What happens to them now? Where do they go now? And that's just not young people. That's all people in need of housing. And I think we're going to see an increase in the need for housing as the increase of family domestic violence, unemployment, and just general poverty increases as Australia goes into recession over the next 6-12 months. So I think housing, even if you're not a housing provider, I think housing and housing support should be something that everybody looks at.
Definitely. Thank you, Stephanie. And I'd like to thank all three of our panelists. Firstly, we had Melissa Monteiro, the CEO from Community Migrant Resource Centre. Thank you, Melissa. We had Tairyn Vergara, who still is the CEO of the Parks Community Network. And we finally have Stephanie Oatley, the CEO of Platform Youth Services. Thank you to the three of you. So just to conclude, we can see that there's key themes in terms of what our three panelists have been talking about today as we move from crisis to, I guess, recovery from COVID-19, how we communicate as organisations and how we cut through the noise and reduce some of that anxiety, whether we're talking about our workforce or the communities we work with, how we support our employees, not only to deal with, I guess, that crisis response, but also as we move to recovery. There's also the opportunity to continue moving in a different direction in terms of how we work and draw upon the skill sets that we have within this sector, whether it's moving towards technology, moving towards different ways of engaging, or moving towards a more place-based approach. There are all opportunities here. One of the things that I want to end on is the fact that Melissa, I believe, said that we need to remember we're not in it alone. And now is the perfect time for us to talk about collaborating as we move to the recovery phase of COVID-19. We as a sector peak are here as well. We offer support and we offer services in line with the demands that have come up for organisations within the context of COVID-19 and can assist as we move out of it. So please make sure you visit our website or you contact us if you need us. So thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to our audience. This is about it, and this is Tom Nance signing off.